Good morning and welcome to Norfolk Community Forum. This is a new venture for us where we're going to be summarizing all of the events and happenings in town in a nice, neat little package that's a little easier to consume than the hours and hours of municipal meetings and committee and board meetings in town. My name is Kevin Kalkut. I am the chair of the Norfolk Select Board, and I'm coming to you today from the remote school for hyperactive boys. That is something that I think all of us are enduring in town this year, and I would be remiss if I didn't make a quick shout out to all the teachers and administrators that have made schooling possible in this crazy environment. So thank you very much for all that you do. I am joined today by our dedicated town administrator, Blythe Robinson, who is also an avid attendee of evening board and committee meetings. Blythe, thank you so much.
Hi, Kevin.
So what we're going to be doing is we're just going to go through a couple of items that are on the forefront of importance here in town, things that we think are noteworthy or worth identifying to the community as a whole. We'll be talking about them at a high level, maybe with a little bit of detail, but really just with the intent of calling out what's going on here in town. So Blythe, with that, would you like to touch on some of the high points?
Sure. I know that the police station and has had a lot of questions about how that project unfolded and wrapped up, and people have been looking forward to a meeting to talk about that. That's coming soon. We are wrapping up some issues we had with the architectural firm and needed to get that behind us before we do, but that's coming to a close in the next couple of weeks. And so our next high priority is to put together a presentation and have something of a town hall style meeting or town meeting style meeting to give that presentation and give residents an opportunity to learn about the history of the project, what went well, what didn't, what we've learned, and how we're going to change our approach to projects in the future for success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know just from the Select Board's perspective, we have been eager to be able to share the details surrounding the project for some time now, but due to the process regarding litigation and mediation, we needed to make sure that those things were settled first before we went out and shared anything with the community. So all the way around, I think everybody's eager to get this information out and start mapping out how we move forward.
Yes. The second item that I think people have had a lot of questions about is what's going on with various 40B projects. Those are really the purview of the Zoning Board of Appeals, the ZBA, but I can just give you kind of a high level of where some of them are. There a project at 194 Main Street, I think it's called the Residences at Norfolk Station, was approved earlier this summer. Don't know when it's going to start. Construction across the tracks, if you will, on Rockwood Road at number 25 is a 40B project being constructed right now. So we approved a project at 144 Seekonk Street. That's going to be 44 units of housing, and I don't have a start date of when that will happen. It just got approved in mid-August. The ZBA is also working through a permit for a project called Abbeville up on Lawrence Street. They're continuing to work on that, and we're believing that that project will be approved sometime in perhaps in October. Those most recent projects will help the town get into what's called safe harbor for a period of at least 1 year and two once Abbeville is done. And what that means is no new 40B projects can be submitted in that time. So it gives us a little bit of a breather before others might come before us. At the moment, the town has not gotten to 10% of its housing stock as affordable. We're at just under 5%, and so these projects will help us get closer. But this issue will continue to be on our plate for a while. So I want to make sure you're updated on that.
Right. And, one of the important things to note there is the ability for us to enter safe harbor is due to the housing production plan that we instituted back in 2018, I believe.
Correct.
So it is going to be important for us to not only leverage safe harbor to be able to create some short and long-term plans for affordable housing development here in town so we don't get behind the eight ball and put in a bad position, but also need to keep on the forefront the need to update that housing production plan, as I believe that plan is only good for 5 years.
Yes,
So
we're planning to go ahead and request funding from CPC next spring to do an update to that. One other development project that people ask about is what's going on with Southwood Hospital. We have had some interest from different developers, primarily for an e-commerce and light industrial type of use. That would require some changes to our zoning bylaw. There's nothing that's assured at the moment. We continue to talk with people and hope to be able to bring forth a plan and possible zoning changes, maybe next spring. I can't be sure at this point, but it is getting some interest.
Also of note, we do have a committee in town designated as the B1 Working Zoning Committee. This committee has been meeting for the better part of a year and a half now and is made up of individual representatives from a few boards and committees in town, the Board of Health, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Planning Board, the Select Board, and also has some resident participants as well. The scope of this committee has been to assess town center zoning, to identify if there are opportunities for us to be able to, A, accommodate for the upcoming growth coming to our town as forecasted by some of our school-age children projections, and two, to be able to identify if there are opportunities for us to be able to accommodate for more affordable housing in town center, an area which by smart growth standards is best suited for that type of development. We have been discussing different ways to be able to make this work in terms of changing zoning as a whole for the district, identifying what type of development we want. Do we want mixed use? Do we want residential only? And we've come up with some zoning proposals. We got some feedback from the community, but the process is still ongoing. We're still trying to find the right fit. And right now, I think that we're targeting 40R as a program, as a potential to be able to utilize a program that will help us to achieve not only what we're looking to from the scope of the committee, but also to have some other benefits in terms of being able to potentially deny other 40B applications if we have an active 40R. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but 40R is a program where you would proactively designate a district, a parcel, a zoning area in town for a certain type of development that would adhere to its own standards and caps for residential density, footprint, design guidelines, what have you. There would be an affordable component associated to it, but we'd be able to define it has to be mixed use, it has to have this much commercial, it has to be this high. So we're exploring that now. We are meeting about once every 3 weeks to be able to define that and hope to have a proposal ready for the town for next spring.
Thanks. People have been asking about how the budget has evolved since June, and especially how it impacts schools. So I just wanted to touch upon that. The state budget is not finalized yet. They're pushing that final approval to sometime in October, but they have already told all cities and towns that they are going to be able to fully fund two different revenue streams that we receive. One is called unrestricted government aid, and the other one is Chapter 70, which funds schools. Both are going to be funded at the FY20 or last fiscal year's level. And when we bypassed the local budget in June, we actually made an estimate that they would not be able to do that. So there's additional revenue coming our way this fall to be able to put towards schools. And one of the articles we'll have at town meeting is to transfer some of those funds we're getting over to the school district to help them out this year. So I would encourage people to check into advisory committee meetings to keep up on all those details as well as ours. But that's some good news to share. Also, the CARES money that people hear about, the town was allocated for just over $1 million this year for things that are we've been impacted with the pandemic. We applied for just under about $50,000 of those funds in June for our costs up till then. And those have all been covered. We've received that money. We've had costs probably closer to $400,000. Some of those are eligible to be applied to a different federal grant called through FEMA. And we're tracking or following up on those dollars to receive them as well. We are going to have additional costs for schools, both for local and for King Philip, for all things that I think people expect: disinfecting and cleaning, PPE, computers for remote learning, all those sorts of things. Our schools have been spending money on those things, and we'll be prepared to pay to support them with some of our dollars as we go through the year. So that's some good news. And we will be having a fall town meeting on November 17th, and we'll be some of the articles will be addressing some of those things. So I think
Absolutely.
that's what I wanted to cover on that, unless you had any questions.
No, I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to note that, I know that there was a lot of focus put on the budget this past cycle because of the situation we were in, both locally and nationally. But one of the things that the select board did vote to do was to commit to restoring funding to those departments that were cut should funding come in excess of what our expectations were put at that time. And as you've noted, we will be seeing some additional funding coming in, but it is noteworthy that it doesn't automatically happen. We committed to proposing to the town a budget that restores that funding, but we will still need to show up to fall town meeting to vote that into action. So I know there were some people who thought that it would automatically happen because the commitment was made, but I wanted to clarify the commitment is to bring forth to the community a budget that reflects that commitment, and it still needs to be voted on.
Exactly. I mean, we want to be very careful because while we're feeling more comfortable about the current year's budget, because the state's been able to make us whole on those two things, there's some other things that we're still tracking we may not receive. And we want to make sure that we spend prudently on things we need to do this fall, but also that we make sure that we are prepared should FY22 be a little more difficult as the pandemic continues, that we're prepared to continue to be able to fund our schools and our departments appropriately into the next fiscal year. So.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep. So another item that's certainly gotten a lot of interest in town over the summer is dog hearings. As you well know, we've spent a fair number of hours at the last two recent meetings going through the process of a dog hearing, and I just thought it would be helpful to very quickly give people a couple of points on that. So dog hearings are something that happens when someone in town is affected by actions of a dog, whether a dog is could considered to be a nuisance, say excessive barking or getting loose and causing issues in town, or perhaps there's something as difficult as a dog biting a person or another animal and causing injury. Those things are often, don't often come before the board. They're sometimes handled between different parties, but depending on the situation, a resident can request a dog hearing, and those hearings come before the select board. And there's a process laid out in state law that we have to follow in order to adjudicate those issues. And we just did that on Tuesday night. Currently the board is the quote hearing officer. That could be changed in the future. We're looking at make sure our bylaws are up to date on this issue, and that is a decision point. And the outcomes can be different. For a nuisance dog, the state doesn't prescribe the decisions that we can make, but the goal is to stop the nuisance if that comes to be. If the dog is deemed dangerous because of the severity of what it did, the state very clearly outlines the choices that a community can make to resolve that matter as well. And so that's kind of a process in a nutshell. We hope that we don't have to do these very often because they're difficult for everyone involved, but that's kind of how they work.
Yeah, and just speaking from the experience of being part of both a nuisance dog hearing way back when I first started, feels like 10 years ago, and the most recent instance with the dangerous dog hearing, they are not an enjoyable experience at all. I mean, as a dog owner, you feel for the owner. As a lover of dogs, you might feel for the animal. You feel for any victims that may have been subjected to a terrible experience. And so trying to find the middle ground of how you balance public safety against that compassion for the situation is very difficult. So definitely not a desirable position to be put in, but definitely something that needs to happen to ensure that everybody is safe.
Right. So we're in the process of updating our bylaw on this and animal control in general. And I anticipate we'll be bringing that to the Springtown meeting for voters to weigh in on.
Thank you.
Yep.
So while we're talking about public safety, that gives us a nice little segue into our next segment. We thought it would be important to be able to introduce a different department in town with each of these episodes so that we can talk more specifically about the operations in Norfolk and give the community kind of a lens, sightline into kind of the operations of what's going on here in town. And while we're talking about public safety, we figured who better than our Chief Chuck Stone. Welcome, Chief. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you.
So, Chief, obviously, policing as a whole has been a focus over the course of the last few months, but it's important to identify, locally how we handle public safety as a whole. So, to that end, how has the scope of public safety changed during your time here in Norfolk, and what kind of things have we done to change with the times?
All right, so when I started, there were a number of homes, half of the homes that are here now, half of the businesses at least. The population is now doubled. When we were out back in the day, we had one car from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. That's to handle the whole town, whatever was going on. It was all paper. There were no such thing as computer back in the early 70s. So everything was labor intensive. If you had to look up any facts and figures, now you can just hit a couple of buttons, and as you all know, computers are very quick. Give you whatever you want to, whatever's put in, you can get out. So a lot of things have changed back then. When I first started, you went to the police academy, and they've made it mandatory since I started that you go before you start working. I worked about 1.5 years before I even went to an academy. So that's one of the greatest changes. And we did not have anything because that would liken to 40-hour in-service or specialized training back. So, and that we started that in '83, and we call that the South Suburban Police Institute. And we started that ourselves, the local towns. So that's one of probably the greatest things is we're now getting additional training after that long period of 26 weeks of recruit training. So probably one of the biggest changes since.
Thank you. That's great, Chief. How many hours would you, so it's 40 hours a year that a department member has to take?
Yeah, the state law mandates 40 hours.
And my impression in working with you is that there's additional training that we offer to officers beyond that to make sure that we're on top of as many situations that could happen for an officer in the field as possible.
Yes, so let me describe what's happening for 40 hours in service this year. We're having something called implicit bias, de-escalation, and communication training. It's how to talk to people a little bit better. Riot and crowd techniques, as you've seen across the country. Those have happened, not so much here, but across the country. Legal updates, first responder, CPR, those are the basic classes, use of force. And locally, we do a lot of, in Norfolk, we have they're in fact doing it right now, taser, their semi-automatic weapon training, baton, rifle, and hostage situations that do occur. Believe it or not, in Norfolk, every once in a while, somebody has a moment, and we need to get them out of the house and make the people who live there or in the neighborhood safe. So those
Thank
are
you. That's great. That's very helpful. I'm glad you spoke about that. So tell me about the culture of the department. What do you instill in your officers about how we operate in Norfolk and how we take care of our citizens?
Well, one of the things we try to do is get our public educated on what the laws are. Some of them don't. They may get their license when they're 16 and forget how to drive after that. They oftentimes will need our help to for various things. There's accidents, they get lost. The people that come through town. We have as you know, we have 4 prison facilities in our town. One of them's right now closed, but growing up, there were two, and we added one in the 80s called Pondville. So there's a lot of people that come through this town. So, and a lot of people don't understand you have a prison in your town, and right down the street from the fire station. So You know, a lot of it is we're service oriented. We like to help people understand things. We're doing the SRO program up at the junior high. Michelle Palladini, our officer, is very active in that. And we're still running the DARE program. So Officer Plimpton, who retired, still does that. So
That's great. Thank you very much.
So Chief, you had talked about the additional training initiatives that exist and that have changed over the course of your time here in Norfolk. And just for reference, how long have you been here in Norfolk?
In less than a month, that'll be 44 years.
Wow.
That is a good amount of time.
Well, when you think about you know, the fact that, you know, there was only 12 officers back in 1976 when I got on, 12, and now we're at 21. So if I said the population and the homes have doubled and the businesses have doubled, at least, you know, you might think that we would double our department. So, but you know, we're just under what 12,000, I think, according to the numbers. And that includes some of the prison people, but you know, a lot has changed in that regard. So,
yeah. So to that point, though, I mean, you've been here for a little while now. Can you talk to us about some of the things that you're most proud of in terms of the performance of the department or the product that's been put forth to the community?
Well, I'm proud of the fact that in the last 10 years, we've been pretty much rated a safe community and in the top 10. And I sent something to Blythe yesterday that said we were rated this year in 2020 fourth, which I think is creditable out of the 356 towns that are in Massachusetts. So, so part of the reason for, you know, one of the things I think we've done is, and it goes back to that culture question and what we do to keep people safe, is we try to educate our own public, but we have a very extensive traffic enforcement program. Even though we only have probably 3 people on a shift to do it, we're still trying to keep people going slow because it's a neighborhood issue. People are very, they get out of, you know, going too fast, that gets the neighbors all rankled, and we're trying to mitigate that. So one of the things I think that has kept our community safe is we're doing a good job with that as best we can. And because of that, we're hearing from people that we might pull in and they visit our jail cell, that it's well known that we want to stay out of Norfolk because you might get pulled over and they find out that you have a suspended license, a revoked license, that there's a warrant for your arrest, their car's not registered, it's not insured. There's any number of things, and those people don't want to come in. So we think that they're going elsewhere because of that, and it's been stated in our cell block. So trying to just keep people safe. That's our biggest priority.
Thank you, Chief. Really appreciate that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add for the community in terms of things of note or notifications, highlights, anything you'd like to put out there?
No, we're here to serve our residents and the people that come to work here every day. Our goal every single day is to keep them safe, and we'll continue to do that. We're here even during the COVID crisis. We're here. People who work in the office every day, they're here from 7 to 5, Monday through Friday, and they'll take people coming in. And we have officers who will go either to the house and talk 6 feet away, or we'll talk to them over the phone if they desire. So we're here every day, and anybody wants to come down, we'll serve them.
Well, thank you very much, Chief. We do appreciate that, and we do appreciate the service of you and everybody on the force. Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
All right, Blythe, that takes us into our last portion of our meeting today, and that is going to be to highlight some upcoming dates, events, things of note for the community. What do we have on our list?
A special town meeting, our fall town meeting coming up on November 17th. We're not completely sure yet whether it's going to be at the middle school or the high school. We've got both places reserved. As the chief mentioned earlier, making safe plans for everyone attending, given the COVID pandemic is forefront of our minds. And so we'll keep people apprised of where that's going to be and what procedures are in place. And also keeping that in mind, it's a fairly short warrant. Right now, we're tracking about 10 articles, basically financial in nature, to make some adjustments to the budget and capitals we typically do in the fall. So hopefully we'll be able to get people in and out quickly. Take care of those.
And if it's anything like our Springtown meeting planning, I mean, we jumped through about 4 or 5 different formats in 3 or 4 different locations throughout the pre-planning process to ensure that was a safely executed event. So I imagine that with the outlook not looking so much different than we were in May, we will need to have some discussions surrounding how we execute that, especially in a time where it may not be as feasible for us just to head out to the football field in November.
It might not. That's true. Other things that are going on, I think people just might like to know about. As you know, the board recently approved a contract for the construction of our 3rd well field at Holbrook Street. And so the wells that are in the ground are in place, but now we need to build the building and put all the equipment in it and run the main to the rest of the system. That's what we approved, and that's going to start this fall so that we can have that 3rd well online before next summer. This summer was a little difficult. At the beginning, we were having trouble keeping up with demand. I think we did reach out to residents about that. This will help us better do that next year, so we're looking forward to that. I'd remind people that some of our buildings are open. As the chief said, they're serving residents, of course. So is the Council on Aging. I was there on Tuesday and saw a small but dedicated exercise class going on. Someone was going shopping. So if people, they're providing services, so please check them out or call them. And same with the library. They've started offering indoor services as well, and I would give a plug for people to look those up if they're interested. Another question that we've been getting is what's going on with the election and ballots. Paper ballots were mail-in ballots were very popular in the primary here. About 1/3 of our residents filled them out and completed them. We have to receive those ballots from the state in order to be able to mail them out to everyone who wants them. So we're anxiously awaiting those coming, hopefully by the end of this month. But the only reason we haven't mailed it to you already is we haven't gotten it. So I just wanted to let people know that we're not waiting. We'll get them to them as soon as we can.
Good note, thank you.
Yeah, so those are the things I wanted to make sure to cover. I wasn't sure if there's anything else you wanted to talk about.
So just a few things to look forward to from my perspective. The select board meeting schedule. If you are interested in learning more about the operations of the town or hearing about the different decision points that are involved in municipal government, our select board meetings are the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of each month. They start at around 7 p.m. We do post them to the My Town Government website. The agendas include the links for Zoom, and in most cases, we do have them streaming via NCTV's YouTube channel when that is available to us. Additionally, at our last meeting, we did approve a liquor license and entertainment license for an event for Town Center this coming Sunday. It is from noon to 7. It will feature Medfield-based brewery, Zealous, who will be serving some of their beers, as well as a food truck from Medfield called Republic, a barbecue food truck, and will additionally have some live music. So it is a new venture for our community to be able to have something like this in Town Center. So we look forward to seeing how it goes and how the community enjoys it.
Great.
Well, I think that's everything that we had to share today. Blythe, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'm glad we've been able to talk about these things, and hopefully people get a chance to watch this and learn more about what's going on in town.
And as this is our pilot episode, for lack of a better term, it is ever evolving. We do intend to keep this basic structure as we go through. The cadence of the shows will probably follow every 4 to 6 weeks to capture as much as we can from the happenings within town. But one of the things we do look to add is a component of community feedback. So we will be reaching out for any questions that you would like answered or reviewed during these segments. We will put up an email address for our office on the bottom here in a graphic. So as we do announce what the next topics will be, please feel free to reach out with any concerns or things that you'd like covered during the course of these shows. So with that, we do appreciate you watching. We look forward to future interactions with you, and we hope everybody stays safe and enjoys the beginning of the school year. Thank you so much.